every step this administration has taken after the death of Renee Good has been to blame the residents of Minnesota, blame the leaders in Minnesota and in Minneapolis, and to excuse and to send a signal to its agents on the ground that they can act however they want to. I think there was a term used, that they had absolute immunity. That term doesn't exist in the law, and they don't have absolute immunity. But like you said, the cruelty, yes, it is the point. But I'd like to remind everyone watching, what were those law enforcement officers doing, eating and then arresting, these people working the restaurant? If that doesn't show a lack of urgency around their supposed mission, I don't know what else would, right? If you're really trying to execute an immigration enforcement action, you're not going to casually eat in a restaurant and then go and you approach your targets. This is just unheard of. This isn't immigration enforcement. It's not law enforcement. It's political intimidation. And I'm going to keep saying this. The president has weaponized the Department of Homeland Security and federal law enforcement to act as his own federal police force. If we don't name that for what it is, we'll keep falling into this trap of thinking that this is just an immigration issue. It's actually a constitutional issue about state police power versus federal police power. And there's not supposed to be this type of federal police power.
Can I just ask a question? I want to stay on that point for a second, Tim, because arrest them for what? Did they have a subpoena? Had they identified the workers in that restaurant as gang members or as felons, or as individuals who are engaged in other illegal activity in this country, maybe belonging to a gang? You sat your ass down at their restaurant and ate their food. And then you come back with what? Where were the warrants? When you looked at that server in the face, did you know, oh, there's a criminal, let me go check some database because I recognize them from some other investigation? This is, it's not just the cruelty is the point. It is just the sheer insanity that they think the rest of us are deaf, dumb, and stupid to what they're doing. I just don't understand how that happens, Tim. I mean, I've listened to you, and just sort of just put the right finger on the pulse here about what this really is in this moment.
Well, it's political, right? Like, this is a political effort, and it's also performative, right? It's politics and it's performance. It's not public safety. That's not what they're doing. They're saying that they're here to go after the worst, and they barely even pay lip service to that anymore. If they wanted to, figure out a way to just go after the worst people that have committed crimes here, they'd do what you're saying. They'd go get a warrant, right? If they wanted to deport the most people, but with the least disruption to communities, right, where there was no performance in it, what they would do is they would go to the big donors, right? They would go to the owners of, construction companies and agricultural plants, and they'd say, sorry, we can't, we need to come look at your employment records and go that way. But they don't want to do that because they don't want to anger, big supporters of the president. Mm-hmm. So instead what they're doing is this, they're going into these neighborhoods, they're going into the communities, they're menacing people. They want to scare people, and they also want to escalate. This Tim Walz, Fry DOJ effort is an effort to escalate, right? They want a response so that they can crack down harder. That's what they're doing. It's politics and performance, and it's an effort to try to gain more authoritarian power for themselves. And that's why they're going about it this way. And I think it's just important to be blunt about that.
That is, in fact, the point, Andre. I agree with Tim. Look, I have to tell you, I'm struggling to see what it is going to take for the Republicans on Capitol Hill are a lost cause to me. I'm not going to wait for them. Mm-hmm. But some of the business leaders that know they have the president's ear, what is it going to take for people to speak up? Because as Governor Walz laid out, first it was, we have all these examples of people that the government has targeted. But this one, obstructed justice for what? How so? In what way, shape, or form? I just think of this James Baldwin quote. He warned us that the great danger is not that people don't see what's happening. It's that they are taught to accept it. If the business community, if lay people in the streets of this country who have been speaking up, but if the business community and other leaders in this country, educational leaders, leaders at law firms who have been willing to stand up to Trump on other things, some of them not so much, but there are some bright spots out there, and I'm not just talking about Mark Elias, people have to stand up because we are not on a slippery slope to authoritarianism, baby. We are living in the opening act of Donald Trump's version of an authoritarian America, and that is not hyperbolic. The photos from Minneapolis to Chicago to right here in Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, they paint the picture and they tell the story.
That's right. I mean, what does every authoritarian leader need? They need their own federal police force. They need their own kind of law enforcement agents that they can direct. We have that. And let's be really clear. Since the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, there was a fear that ICE and Border Patrol, because I hear a lot about ICE, I don't hear about Border Patrol, that these officers were overfunded, that they were not professionalized. And I have worked into 2 Democratic administrations where they have resisted basic use of force policies, basic trainings, because we were afraid to say we need to hold immigration enforcement accountable. President Trump knows exactly what he's doing with these agencies. He found 2 of the biggest law enforcement agencies, not just in the country, but really in the world. And he said, all right, I'm going to deploy them against the city, and he's letting them be free. Some of the people we see doing the most harm have worked at these agencies for decades under multiple administrations.
Like the officer who shot and killed
That's
Renee
right.
Good. He was a 10-year veteran of
a 10-year veteran. So ask, what is that culture where it just took 1 year for him to use force in that way and to adopt tactics? He got that tactic from the Border Patrol, which he served in. But all I hear right now is ICE, ICE, ICE. I want to hear about Border Patrol, about Bureau of Prisons, about the fact that Trump has taken every federal agent and sent them into the front lines to replace local police with a federal police force that is unconstitutional in and of itself. And to your point about Governor Walz and Mayor Frey, they're saying something really important. They're saying, film what you're seeing. If we hadn't seen that video of Renee Good, if we didn't read the story about a family of 6 being tear gassed, if we didn't read about that Mexican restaurant, what is Trump getting away with if we don't see that? And then what is the opposition party going to do? Because you can't just say quick things like abolish ICE or reform certain. This is a system that's been weaponized, and I don't know how we're coming back from it without a clearer vision going forward of right-sizing immigration enforcement and offering a real alternative that Americans can choose in the elections. Because we can be against this, but those agencies will continue on, those officers will continue on, and that legacy and that emboldening of what will keep happening.
Tim, right now we're talking about blue cities and blue states, but there are rumors swirling in Central Florida that there's about to be a big ICE operation there. When it comes to DeSantis's backyard, when it comes to Abbott's backyard, when all of a sudden it's the ag folks in their state saying, hi, you're decimating our workforce, or the construction industry that's saying we can't build homes without these workers. Does he listen to them?
Potentially. I mean, we've seen him talk on some of this stuff, particularly with related to the farm workers and the hospitality workers, since that's his business. You know, he's employed plenty of undocumented immigrants over the years. But all that stuff takes time. You can do a lot of damage in the interim, right? So he already's done this in my home state, Louisiana, right? Like they sent a bunch of troops in. Bavino was there, a little 4'11" center for, the Border Patrol guy. He's marching around the French Quarter. And it had a real impact. It really did. I have friends who are in the construction business saying like people weren't showing up to work, like even people who were illegal because they didn't want to be hassled, right? Like it had a negative impact economically in the state. This is kind of weird to say luckily, but like unfortunately for Louisiana, like they moved all those folks to Minneapolis when this stuff exploded in Minneapolis, and now everybody says, look, everybody's back to work, right? So they can go into Florida and Texas, create a ruckus, get a scene, get the images for TV that they want, scare people, and then leave kind of before I think that pushback happens. Especially when you just see the evidence that like, look, these business leaders have not had any backbone when it comes to pushing back to them.